I'm excited today to be interviewing Catherine Olivier, the VP of Sales Development at Cognism. Welcome, Catherine.
Well, thank you very much, Matthew. Happy to be here.
Yeah, brilliant. And honestly, so far, best background of any interviewee we've had so far. For context, people watching, Cognism have a wonderful office in the Shard in London. So lucky sales reps, sales leaders, this is what they get to live with every day.
Yeah, it's a good view.
So, just in case anyone doesn't know who you are, which I'd be surprised by, maybe you could just give us a quick rundown of Catherine, who you are, where you are today, how you got there.
Sure. So yeah, my name is Catherine Olivier, originally from Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Have been living in the UK for almost 15 years now. And when I moved to the UK, I started as an SDR. And I worked my way up through all the various positions you can have in sales, inside sales, channel sales, field sales, you name it. But always came back to loving inside sales, SDR teams, etc., and have been managing and building teams for way longer than I care to remember. And I will age myself if I say so. But yeah, have worked in a lot of like both hardware and software organizations, but always IT and tech, and effectively grown to kind of specialize in having international SDR organizations. So I've had them all the way from Australia to San Francisco and had to work all the time zones, et cetera, whilst doing so. And now at Cognism, have been here since November of 2024. And absolutely loving it. And I've again have a team all the way from Australia to Boston this time, and everything in between that. And it's great.
Yeah, I'm trying to work the time zones like that because you've said that like it's the other way around, right? So do you work Boston to Australia hours, or how do you juggle that?
Australia is very, very early in your morning, and then into the evening for America.
Yeah, I remember I used to live in Australia and it became very hard for all communication. So kudos to you doing that. Now, before we hit the play button, we were talking about, thank you for the intro actually, because I think this is probably perfect topics to speak to you about, but it's around building good habits and hiring and team building, which, you've got extensive experience prior your leadership roles in all the sales roles, right? So you've been there, done that, the skill sets, and now you're in a role which I think reputationally is one of the best hiring organizations, which I know you're putting your twist on since you've joined Cognism. So yeah, I maybe we'll start with the big one, then we'll start talking on like hiring. With Cognism. I'm curious, like, is it a case of the type of roles you're hiring? Are you hiring for more junior roles to train them internally, or is it a case of looking for experience as well to kind of hit the ground running? What's the focus there?
Fun one, a little bit of both. So effectively within Cognism, we have what we call commercial SDRs who cover the SMB space. We've got them covering mid-market and we've got them covering enterprise. Ideally, we would want the mid-markets wants to move into enterprise, the commercial wants to move into mid-market, et cetera, et cetera. However, we've promoted so many SDRs into AE roles recently that it's a big bunch of people that we're currently hiring, of the majority of which will just slot into that commercial space, right? As newbies, learning a majority of inbound, et cetera, really getting their feet under the table with the role. But it's musical chairs. So we'll have maybe a few that will slot directly into a mid-market seat, which means those are going to be the ones that have a little bit of prior SDR experience compared to the commercial ones, which can be straight out of college, if you may.
Brilliant. So the actual roles in particular are kind of a stepping stone link to experience.
Yes.
And that's always wonderful to hear when you've got all the roles. So is that a case that all the roles can get the opportunity to progress into an AE, or do they have to make all the steps?
No, you can progress as long as you progress your experience and your skill set within a certain segment, if you may, you can progress into AE roles from there.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like, I always see with this, it's like pros and cons in the sense of it makes the role incredibly attractive to the people you're looking to hire. But when you get the really, really good people in your team, and there's the selfish side where you're like, I just want to keep them for a little bit longer.
Yeah. So we did put some, we are putting some like barriers and markers in place, right? So that you don't hire a great SDR and lose them 2 months later to an AE role. But SDRs are there to progress into other bits of the organization. So I would be crazy to try to hold them back.
Yeah,
It's that
100%.
fine balance.
I think that could be something we could touch on in a bit, actually, because it's a really interesting topic where I think there's managing the expectations of people who are hiring, plus the people who are incredibly talented who want to move. So, but let's bring it back, right? So you've got all these roles open. Anyone who's watching this would highly suggest, if you're applicable, to apply. But you're looking for the best of all those different categories, right? Maybe very little experience, the bit of experience. So what would be your process to find the best?
Yeah, so funnily enough, when we opened our positions, we received, I think, more than 300 applications in the first day and a half or something crazy like that. So we then had to close it again because we can't manage that many that quickly, right? So we stopped that. And then it was funny how few of those 300 actually reached out to anyone either in the company or in the hiring team. So we had such a vast volume to go through that in the end we were like, so how are we going to do this? We're like, well, let's get the ones that SDRing their way into the SDR role. So the ones that were interviewed and screened first were the ones that reached out to the hiring manager, reached out to me, reached out to any one of the SDRs currently in place, trying to get more information, or did something that was just a little bit different, like made a video or a voice note or called, etc. Because that's the thing, like just clicking quick apply and then just hoping for the best is just not going to do it. At least not for us.
Yeah. Now, would you, in the actual job descriptions, would you encourage this, or is it literally just as a really quick way to highlight the ones who have got the grit and the ambition to just
Well, I've
try
let the
the?
cat out of the bag now, right? But in general, no, we didn't mention it. Like, we just wanted to see how people would approach it. And if anyone is clever enough or proactive enough to pick up the phone and try to call anyone, it doesn't need to be me, but anyone within Cognism who then goes, oh, I spoke to this person. Some people called AEs who were recently promoted, right, from an SDR role to go like, how do you do it? Like, how was it? Can I learn a little bit more? Perfect. And they would then drop a note to us going, hey, I've just spoken to this person. This was good.
I think that's an incredible tool for screening, actually. Now, I suppose some companies may not necessarily have anyone call internally, but I think in this scenario, I mean, and would you then see that these people naturally would be better fits for these roles as you progress through the interview process?
Yeah, because they have that thought process and they have the no fear of just reaching out to strangers kind of barrier that you need when you're looking for SDRs. And look, if it's a very small company, it can be as simple as just reaching out to the recruiter or HR. You know what I mean? It doesn't need to be anyone else. But I'm just like, not reaching out to anyone is very, very dangerous.
Yeah, and I think now more than ever, people need to we have to stand out, right? When applying for roles, and I think the role is so obvious about reaching out to people. Yeah, do it. I think that's an incredible tool at your disposal to. So for other leaders who are listening, I think one thing to not be afraid of is actually, well, one, maybe encouraging this through the sales process, but like these are the people. That's a really good indicator of someone who could be really good at the rest of the job. So okay, cool. So you start with these people who are already reaching out, phone, video, and so on. Let's then move along to the actual interview process itself. So, like, what are the core things you're looking to evaluate throughout that process? I suppose we've already got a tick on some of these people on the tenacity of reaching out, but I mean, what are the other things you're looking to evaluate on an interview?
Kind of I think the most important thing is their why. Like, why you, why sales, and why with us. That's actually our second round interview. They have to present on that. So they'll go through screening first, the general, like, where do you work, is our salary even in the same bandwidth, etc., right? Like the standard ones. Then they'll talk to someone on our SDR manager team. So it doesn't need to necessarily be the one hiring manager, but any of our managers was helping with the screening calls to just kind of get a sense of, are you SDR material and would you fit in our organization as a personality, like as much as you can do that in a half an hour to an hour call. And then the ones that came out well there were invited to our office to do a presentation. And that was a why me, why sales, why Cognism presentation. And it was genuinely to weed out anyone who talks a good game in the first conversation, but then can't back it up with any kind of data points or more of a background story. Plus, you get to see how they prepare, how they research, how they build a presentation out, and how they present in person. And it was for them to then see the office, obviously.
Yeah. And were there any sort of specific skills they would demonstrate as part of all of this that you can directly link to the skills required as an SDR role?
It's definitely the ones that show some sort of competitiveness or tenacity or ability to deal with difficulties, because everyone knows being an SDR, you've got a lot of pushback a lot, and you need to be not that person that's going to wallow in self-pity, but you need to be able to pick yourself up and get going. And so either that was already like part of the presentation, like, oh, I've been like a top sports person, or I've done like really horrible, difficult jobs before, and this is how I've dealt with it. Or those would be the questions that would come after to have as a conversation piece.
Yeah, brilliant. And I mean, actually, just alone coming in to do a presentation, it's like especially now, out of the ordinary. That's an already potentially for some an uncomfortable position. So then getting them to go through that, brilliant. I think that's some really good points to tie. So just to maybe flip this on its head, because it's always great to talk about all the good stuff that can happen and what to look for. But has there been a scenario where you've made a bad hire and be like, damn, and then maybe you could share some of the learnings from that?
Yeah, obviously. I mean, I've been doing it for so long and hired so many. There's always a few duds, if you call it that. Luckily, not too many. I think the process is, if you've got enough rigor and enough systems in there, you'd be able to weed it out if there's like multiple people looking at a candidate. I've had it where, specifically with rookies, so to say, yeah, I'm good with adversity, and yeah, I'm really good with rejection, etc. And you think, okay, well, they make a valid point as why they would be okay with that. And then they start to drop and realize how hard it is. And it turns out that they really can't deal with it. That I've had. So it's definitely like the type of personality trait that you almost can't test for. And you kind of have to believe them on their word that they've been fine with rejection and they will be fine again. But then when it happens again and again and again and again and again, it turns out that they just really don't enjoy that. So I've had that. And that was specifically when hiring like more experienced SDRs, the ones that turn out to be just too stuck in their ways. And that's another thing to like be mindful of when hiring people who have been doing it for a very long time. It's like, okay, but we're going to do things differently, or we will have different tools, or we will actually require to use some tools where you didn't use them before, to then make sure they adapt and that they do that. We've had a few, not a lot. I've had a few over the years that just didn't get to that stage where you go, okay, you're generally embracing the new role, or the new era rather.
Yeah, well, I think it's a common challenge, right? Because one, tools are popping up left, right, and center all the time. Yeah, so I think this is almost a wonderful segue into actual habits, because it's almost, you're looking for people who are willing to essentially break previous habits that they had, but still you want them to be able to apply the skill that you're hiring them for undid. And I suppose question on segue this over and finalize the hiring element is like, would you then normally notice this during the onboarding process? That first few months ramping, is that where you would see?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not something that then suddenly pops up a year and a half later or something like that. You will notice that relatively quickly.
Yeah, certainly. There's been a debate around like when you're hiring for an SDR role, like should you hire one or two for the role? Have you got any thoughts on that?
What do you mean? Like, I have one role open and I hire two people and then see who's better?
Yeah. So some of the
Not
suggestions,
cool.
some people
Not
say
cool.
two, competition, support, that kind of goes hand in hand. If you've got the budget to hire two, with one, you potentially increase the risk of, that role in churns. Have you
Okay,
come
so
across that
one, I've
before?
never been in a position that I can just hire two when I only have one head count. No
Yeah.
matter how big the organization was that I worked for, that's not how things were done. And on the other hand, I feel that a candidate commits themselves to go and work for an organization. But on the other hand, the flip side is we commit ourselves to making their career a success and to invest like training and coaching and support. And by like splitting that in half and saying, well, we're kind of doing it 50-50 and see who ends up on top, I don't think that's cool.
I think very beautifully put. Yeah, okay. So it's commitment both ways. I'll be saying this next time I have this debate with someone.
Okay.
I'll quote you directly. Brent, okay, so let's talk about the onboarding process then, because this is where I think the wonderful thing about Cognism, growing company, established brand as well. So imagine you've got processes in place which are like, we know this works. Like
Mhm.
maybe put your twist on it, but maybe you could walk us through what like an onboarding process for the first 3 months would look like, maybe a high level.
Yeah, I mean, we're going probably a bit faster than 3 months, but generally, like the first week, it's going to be learning everything about the organization, but also about the space that we're in. So you'll have all the presentations from the different people in the organization, right? You've got HR, you got IT, you get sales, but also customer success, etc., etc. So they get a good vibe, and marketing, a good vibe of what's going on. Then information about like what space are we playing in, right? We're in data. Why, and how does that work, and who are the players, and how do we kind of stack against that, etc. And then next to that, we'll have the very much like job specific training. Like, do you know what Salesforce is? Do you know what outreach is? Like bonus points if we hire people that have worked with that before, but not all of them have, right? So we'll just go back to basics, because you might know as well, like Salesforce will look different for organization to organization. The fields are named differently. It looks all weird. So just back to the basic. This is how we do it. This is how we track it. This is what outreach is. This is what our sequences and our templates look like, and this is how we would want you to use it. And then kind of take it from there. We're using, and I'm going to name it. We're using Hyperbound, for call training, etc. So apart from sitting down with their managers or their peers to like practice, they also get some extra practice doing that. Yeah.
Have you found using tools like Hyperbound, is that benefited, accelerated? Because this is the other thing about SDR roles, right? It's like, how quick is too quick to get someone on the phone with prospects? So I always thought maybe one of the benefits of Hyperbound is you can get them in a safer environment, saying the words, getting pushback. But yeah, have you seen a benefit there? And I suppose the question is to yourself, like, how quick do you want to get them on the phone?
Yeah. So actually, the onboarding process from Cognism wasn't set by me, right? That was built by Dave Bantam over the years and has proven to work really well. So when I came on board, I wasn't going to go in like, oh, let's scrap that and start over. I'm not going to break what's working, right? So we're just making some tiny tweaks as we go on. And I think one of the ones is that I think I've changed from getting them on the phone on day 5 to actually getting them on the phone on day 8 or 9. So give them like a few more days of getting used to things. And then we'll see how that goes. But because most of our new hires are in like the commercial space that has an insane volume of inbound leads, and we grade them, right? Like A grade, B grade, and then the D grade leads. We can genuinely start them with just a trickle of the lower quality leads. We've got a router that is very, very malleable. So we can generally say like, they need only 10% of the volume today, 20% of the volume tomorrow, and then like kind of up it as they go along. And we can set the quality as well that's coming their way. So you can start with 10% of grade D and you can go to 80% of grade A, like after a month and a half or something. We haven't quite figured out how we want to do that yet. Now we're going to have like a cohort starting that's a few more SDRs at the same time. But that's the theory, right? We can drip feed them until they're comfortable enough.
One, this sounds like RevOps heaven, and two, this sounds like onboarding heaven. Just kind of upping everything as you get more and more comfortable with the previous day. You're always stretching. I think that's a lovely. That sounds like an incredible setup, to be honest. Okay, cool. So onboardings happened, getting into the roles, successful ramp. If we sort of focus a bit more on the habit side of things, you as sorry, Jen, actually just to remind me, like, how big is the SDR function?
We've got around 45 people globally.
Yeah, incredible sized team, right? So I think this then becomes an interesting one. It'd be great to get your takes on this, because then managing things like the daily, weekly, monthly habits of all of these people. I appreciate you've probably got managers as well who support you with this, but for you and your team, what are those those non-negotiable daily, weekly habits that everyone's got to live by?
So specifically when it comes to inbound leads, we've got like an SLA of like, be on it within 5 minutes if you can, please, right? So you get the notification, you need to jump on that. So that's one of the things that people need to get used to. They need to know what that looks like, where to go, how to action it, etc. We don't run a team based on necessarily like numbers of activities, as in I expect 200 calls a day or I expect this many emails a day. We run it more on outcomes. So we measure them on connects and conversations. So you need to have 6 conversations a day. Don't care if that takes you 6 calls because all of them pick up, or if that takes you 600 calls because no one picked up. But that should be your aim, right? Because we then know what percentage of those conversations convert into meetings, and then opportunities, and then etc. So that's kind of the maths that's behind that.
So incredibly refreshing to hear. That is, and I want people who are listening to this. I mean, if this is happening at Cognism, there is no, in my opinion, I don't think there are any arguments against this, right? Because there is always that debate on how many calls is the right amount of calls, and it's like that. I don't think that matters, because you do sometimes get people who are scared, will happily just dial 100 times, hang up because they don't want to have the call. Whereas like this is like, so we're purely targeting on, you know, the actual outcome, conversations that are occurring, and then conversion rate from there. I think that has that always been the case at Cognism.
It's been going for a while. They made the switch a little while ago, and I've just like pushed down on that a little bit harder, so to say. And it's still very much in line with outreach on LinkedIn, outreach via email. Depending on the teams, depending on the regions, etc., the balance is slightly different everywhere. But given our little pat on the shoulder, given our good data quality, right? We've got a lot of good phone numbers, and phones conversations still convert the best in most of our regions. So it's all about like reaching out on LinkedIn, sending some emails to make sure that once you get them on the phone, they know who we are, they know what we're about, and they're happy to like book a meeting.
Would you be able to share anything on like, okay, outcomes of this? Great. The number of conversations is one of the key drivers there. I speak to a lot of founders who are, you know, they're trying to work out how many meetings is enough meetings. And I know this is always linked to really like, you know, average contract value and close rate and so on. You know, is there a rough number on how many meetings per month you would expect your SDRs on average to be booking?
It really depends for us per segment. So when you're looking at our commercial segment, which is much more high volume, they book 3 times as many meetings as the guys in enterprise. But a different percentage of that goes through, or even though the same percentage goes through, the value is a lot lower in SMB, as you can imagine. So it's all maths everywhere. So our RevOps team is amazing to kind of set the expectations there. But we're heading specifically when you're doing like enterprisey, anywhere like 8 or 12 meetings, that will eventually then only a percentage of those will become genuine pipeline opportunities. But yesterday I was on a call with another leader, and they have a goal of 2, but then like 2 a month. But then those are like super fully qualified, way down the funnel type of thing. So it really depends on where you measure it, and we measure it relatively at the early stage.
I used to work for a company where our close one rate was 75%, not because we were incredible at sales, but because we would make it a deal at the point a proposal was sent, right? And it's like,
exactly.
It's so misleading depending on the angle that you look at it. Okay, also, I mean, okay, so team of 45, I've got a couple of questions on this, right? So, and this is probably more about how the week is planned as a general rule of thumb. I mean, to lead into this question, I suppose, time blocking. Some people love it, some people hate it. I mean, what's your stance on blocking in specific actions, specific days?
I think it's quite good. It all depends on your setup. So one is for Cognism, people can book time in with the SDRs for like demos and discovery calls. So their calendars get blocked out by people, and they don't have control over that. So if you want to keep control of your calendar, you need to block out time blocks so that people don't go in that specific bit of time, right? So with our expectations of making a number of calls to get to your conversations, you need to make sure you have enough time to do so. So I always say, like, anyone who's struggling, like, make sure you time block enough time out to do your research, do your follow up on your emails and your LinkedIn, and specifically make your calls. With regards to blocking time for calls, my advice is always like, don't block 9 to 10 a.m. every single day, every single week, because you might try to reach out to a prospect who always has their first team meeting from 9 to 10, and you'll never get hold of them, right? So advice that I picked it up somewhere else as well, right? Like always 2 blocks, like a morning and an afternoon slot. But then with there being 10 working days in 2 weeks, you go 10, like 9 o'clock on Monday, 10 on Tuesday, 9 on Wednesday, 10 on, and you alternate it like that, because then you get Monday the next week is going to be 10 instead of 9. So you always have the 2 different time slots.
I just got deja vu to our last conversation, believe it or not. I think we spoke about this exactly then.
Did we now? Well, I might have stolen it from you then. There you go.
No, I think we were talking about this because it was like, like you say, it alternates each week. And it makes your calendar look beautiful as well, especially if you color code the, not that that's
However,
important.
another thing that I saw recently, which some of my SDRs have started as well, is like the testing to do the 5 minutes before the hour, 5 minutes after the hour, to the people that are just outside of a meeting or just starting a new one or running late for the next one. So you go around those times. So we want to see if our pickup times are better or our pickup rates are better around those.
Jot that down and get you back on this at some point so we can then find out the
Yeah.
results in a few months' time. Well, I've got a couple more
Mhm.
questions for you, especially on those habits. And maybe I'll talk about ask about the habits specifically around what drives outcomes, because I think that has hit true in this conversation, which is like, it's the outcomes that are super, super important. I think that's what drives an incredible growing SDR function. But on the managing those actions, like, do your team focus on one thing, then go on to another and then another? Because it's juggling. When do I send emails? When do I do calls? When do I do LinkedIn DMs? When do I do my admin? I mean, how do you get your team to manage all of that?
I think we rely quite heavily just on our outreach tasks, so to say, to make sure that they stay on top of everything that needs to be done. I'm really doing quite a heavy push on everyone to do all of their outreach via outreach and not have separate Excel sheets or little other things that they do and they have it only in their head or anything like that. Because one, we want to see what's happening and we want to be able to measure it, but also it gives you that crutch of not having to think of what am I going to do next? Because it's going to give you that list of steps to take and actions to do. So that's one. Another habit that I'm trying to instill with everybody is like have your admin time and don't forget about it or don't just go, oh, I'll book something else over it and I will skip it today, because you'll skip it today, skip it tomorrow, and by then you've forgotten everything and everything's a mess. So religiously making sure you've got your notes and your systems up to date is very, very important. And that's something that we're trying to like either block out for people that are struggling or really just make sure they remember. Some of the teams have like daily stand-ups to start the day. Some have weekly ones, kind of depends on like the concept of the team, like the experience and their needs. A lot of Slack communication on like wins, etc., is definitely a habit as well. I think for managers to like make sure you always call out good behaviors and great results, etc. So that's another thing they need to do. But when it comes to like SDRs that are starting, we're going to be helping them like in setting up their week for them, like making sure they understand like what the different bits are that are non-negotiable and where they kind of have time to play. For the more experienced ones that have like alignment with AEs, it's okay, do you have like a start of the week chat with your AE about what you're going to do, and then an end of the week chat about what worked and what didn't, and then kind of like a review how the calls went, etc. It's a habit they also need to get into, right? Like when I asked an SDR and like, so how many times do you meet with your AE? And they go, well, kind of ad hoc when we feel like it. It's like not good enough. You need to have at least a weekly session to make sure you guys stay aligned.
Do you find that holds them more accountable as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important. And I think it also holds the AEs more accountable to like as good as you give to your SDR in like collaboration is probably going to get you better results as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, now, final question to finish this all on. We love to ask people this, and this is the leader version of it. But as a very experienced sales leader, what is the shittest sales leader advice you have been given?
The shittest one. That's a very good one. I've not been given a like the just do more and you'll get more out of it, I think has been the shittest advice. So from leaders who don't really get it or have never been an SDR, just like, why don't you just make more calls? Why don't you just send more emails, and genuinely like the trying to make a team into like a spam cannon and just spray and pray and just send more out. It will be fine. It's like, no, it won't be fine. It doesn't work.
I think that is such a common such a common one when you think about it. And it is also an incredibly dangerous one, because if your messaging's wrong and so on, and then you just do more of it, it does damage to domain, confidence.
Exactly. And I
You're
had that
wasted.
discussion, I think, once with a CMO who was like, oh, well, you're struggling to build pipeline, so I'll just give you 4 times as many leads next month. I was like, I don't want 4 times as many leads. I want better leads.
Yeah, the ones who are actually going to buy, the ones who actually face
Right?
the problem.
Exactly. I don't care how many leads you give me because they're not converting anyway.
Yeah, I love that. More isn't always more,
Exactly.
unless more is more, but it's not always more. So I think that, yeah, tread carefully with that one. I reckon if you've got the PMF, you've got all the exciting customers, and you know who to crank the lever on, then great. Otherwise, don't. Like you're still in calculation phase. Catherine, you've been super generous with your time, and I really thank you for all the insights you've given us on these two topics. That's absolutely brilliant.
You're very welcome. That was fun.
Yeah, no problem. Well, I'll let you get on, and we'll catch you soon.
All right.
Cheers. Thank you, Butter.